All right, so here we want to convert into radical notation. And again, the key phrase is that you will see radical notation in the answer choices, or they'll actually use the verbiage radical notation in the instructions. So when this happens, what's going to be really the driving force, the determining factor here is that the index is going to be equal to the denominator. So everything's going to stay the same except for that little denominator, and that denominator is going to become our square root. But in this case, we don't have a square root because in this case, our denominator is 3. So that means we have a cube root. Now, everything else will be the same. So if I cover up that little denominator, that's exactly what I'm going to write inside of the radical. So I have negative 216 to the first power. Now, I need to keep the 3 because that, again, is not some understood thing. We need the 3 to indicate that it's a cube root. This 1 exponent is always understood. If there's no exponent, that it's 1. So I can drop the parentheses and say it's just negative 216. All right, so now I have to simplify this. To simplify, we have to use the fact that when we have an odd root, specifically when we have a cube root of a negative, what we can do is we can bring the negative out in front. So we can bring the negative in front of the radical. And we talked about why that is, but it's basically because negative 1 to the third is equal to negative 1. So our first step is always to get rid of the negative sign if we can. So in this case, I'm going to bring this negative out in front, and I can do that because it is an odd root rather than an even root. So this will become negative cube root of 216. Now, I then have to factor my 216. So when you draw the factor tree for 216, you'll start with 216 divided by 2, and you'll go through a lot of factorization steps until you get to 2. Let's see, how many 2's do we have here? We have 3 2's, and then you'll have 3 3's. So again, that's skipping some steps. We go through our factor tree, we get down to this as our factor tree. So now, because we're talking about a cube root means that we need to group them in groups of 3. So this cube root tells us to group in 3's. So here, when I have these 3 2's, I'm going to have 1 copy outside of the radical. So I will have my negative sign coming straight down. Then this cube root of 216 is going to be becoming 2 times. And then here I'm grouping in 3's. So I have these 3 3's. So I will have 1 copy outside. So that will become negative 2 times 3, which of course multiplied together just gives us negative 6. Now let's look at another example in the next video.